Well, here we are back at the system, and we've got a little problem. The car is full, charged to 90%. The batteries are full, they're at 96%. And there's no place for the extra power to go. I've done loads of laundry, done the dishes. So it's not hot enough for the AC to kick on enough to really have any confidence that this is going to drain down. And so I always knew I'd kind of get to this point, didn't know exactly when. It was kind of a difficult thing to determine. Well, so what this means is that either the system's going to shut itself off. It actually did that earlier in the day. I came back a little early and put some charge back in the car to try and see if I could get that number down. But I've got about 40 miles of driving to do this evening, but that doesn't help me now. And so we need to go back on the grid to be able to have some place to get rid of the power. And so let's go ahead and do that. Welcome to our closeout for our first week in May. So, bit of a fun benchmark that I predicted would happen this month at some point. We'll discuss that a bit more when we get to the 2nd of May. But let's start off with May 1st. So as you can see, the production is really ramping up, longer days, more consistent weather. The system is now into the 60 kilowatt hour per day range fairly consistently, and we still got relatively cool temperatures, so the home consumption is still fairly low. I left the AC symbol up here because it did kick on once during the day, but the AC consumption is still really minimal, as is evident from the total daily usage there. Other than that, pretty standard stuff, other than what we see here in the notes. And here you see the problem brewing. So the reason we only put 7 kilowatts to the car was because we were already at 90%, and then the system is sitting at 92% at the end of our total solar day. So I think you can kind of guess what's going to happen on the 2nd. And here is May 2nd. So we introduce you to a new symbol for power to the grid. And even with the miles that we drove later in the day, as you saw in the introduction, it still didn't help us. You know, loads of laundry, a bit of AC, some cooking. But the system was just maxed out. Just short of 60 kilowatt hours of production for the day, and we wound up sending 8.3 kilowatt hours of that to the grid. And here's the notes. 12 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. You see the new symbol that we added there. I also set the symbol to set the system to charge the car over the course of the evening, and then try and limit how much we sent out to the grid by doing that. And then here we have the 3rd. Again, a bit more out to the grid. Another day of nearly 60 kilowatt hours of production. By 2 p.m. or so, the system was again at 100%, and we started pumping power out to the grid. About 11.8 kilowatt hours of it. Let you finish up reading that for a second. And then here we have the notes for the 3rd. 14 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. Again, we charged the previous evening so that we wind up starting the day at 90% charge. I like to do that. That's pretty typical of how most people use their electric vehicles. And this will turn into a bit of a theme for the next few days, but it also makes it tough to use the car as a tool to kind of tamp down the amount of power sent to the grid if the car is already full. So, and then here, as you see on the 4th, again starting out the day fully charged with a production of 61.5 kilowatt hours. We're shoving power out to the grid for most of the production day. We charged 3 times to the grid that day, or excuse me, 3 times to the car that day, and I'll go over that a little bit, why that was as we go to the notes. But 182 miles driven. Came home in the evening and had 100% charge on the system, and so was able to put quite a bit of power back to the vehicle right after it was came home depleted. And so then here we have the notes. Again, like I said, I make an attempt to explain what, this confusing charging that we did that day, but basically it represents just how crazy even normal driving habits can be. And you get into this kind of a thing without realizing it on your normal day. It's not until we actually try and make a log of what happens that you see some of this crazy stuff. But these are the kinds of things that we're going to ask our home batteries to deal with on occasion. We had a 2 kilowatt hour top off that we did before we started driving to get it to 100%, so we'd make it there and back, and then once we did get back, we dumped 40 kilowatt hours when we returned. And this would have been pretty difficult to impossible to accomplish on a system that was smaller than 4 power walls. So you can see that the capacity there really helps us out. And then on the 5th, even with the cloud cover that came late in the day, the production was still very good. Very low home usage for the day, not much driving. Again, I was going to remove the AC icon, but when I checked the graph for the day, I did see that it did kick on once. So it's just one of those odd days, I suppose. As far as the home consumption goes, being very low, I didn't do much driving either. It was just spent the entire day at the studio. So here's the notes. Didn't actually charge the car just simply because I didn't get home until after midnight, so the charge to the car winds up showing on the following day. See how I slave away for you guys? The notes basically tell the tale. One thing I did forget to mention, let's pull May 5th back up here a second. One thing that I forgot to mention was, if you look there at the from and to the Powerwall section at the bottom, what you'll see is that we put nearly 50 kilowatts of charge into the battery, and that's the capacity of 3 Powerwalls all on their own. And so that's another example of the benefits of having enough storage capacity so that the power can be used locally instead of sent out to the grid and then having to beg for it back. Or some of you that are planning to run systems where you're completely off of the grid, this is a good indicator where you'd be able to see about how much on-site storage you're going to need to really optimize the system, at least for this type of use. And so that brings us to the 6th. It's in a cloud cover starting to affect production today a bit. Production came down to 44.5 kilowatt hours, storing about the same amount of power as we used though, so it kept the system right around that 78% for our total solar day. Charge to the vehicle that occurred after midnight there is the reason that the system dropped off in percentage overnight so much. This time of year, you usually see that 15 to 18% drop in the system percentage overnight before it can start charging again in the next day. And then we sent the system down to 28 kilowatt hours to fully charge the vehicle for the following day. And so then here's the notes: 28 kilowatt hours to the vehicle, brought the vehicle up to 90% charge to start the day, even though we didn't do a lot of driving that day. That's about it, just stuff for the vehicle there. And then that brings us to the 7th, and more driving, starting a round trip to the Bay Area, charging the vehicle fully the previous evening, got us to 90%, so then we bumped a little bit more in there. And as you can see, we still peaked the system out at 60.8 kilowatt hours near the end of production here. It wasn't any place to put that last 5.8 kilowatt hours. 14 kilowatt hours to the vehicle, more typical kind of 34.4 kilowatt hours used in the home, the AC kicking on a couple of times. And then here we have the notes. Again, pretty typical, other than having to dump some excess power. Starting the day with the car fully charged to start another round trip. That was why that little bump showing to the vehicle of that 14 kilowatt hours to bring us up to 100%. I generally keep the vehicle around 90%. And so then starting the day with the car fully charged, and make another round trip to the Bay Area. System won't charge this evening, but we'll put a charge in the vehicle the following day. So here we have the 8th. This will bring us to a close at our total solar day on the 8th. Basically what I said, returning from a heavy day of driving to and from the Bay Area. We had decent production given how overcast the day was, 53.1 kilowatt hours. Fairly close to matching what the home used even after charging the car. And so then starting the day at 62% and ending at 78%. Pretty basic stuff. And then here are the notes. And so what you can see here is the issue was that we had quite a bit of rainy weather, but that there's also rain that was forecast off and on for the following day as well. And so what I wound up doing was charging the vehicle to around 100 miles to be able to continue to use it. And I felt that I should leave a bit in reserve just in case the next couple of days turned nasty and wound up reducing the power available even further. And that actually turned out to be a really good idea. A good idea that I did that, but not because of the cloudy weather. And so we'll leave that as kind of a cliffhanger for when I close out this coming week. I'll let you know what happened today. But that's about it for this first week in May. So as always, thanks for joining in and following with the Energy Sovereignty Project. I wish you the best of luck with your own systems. For those of you that have been following along, please feel free to like and subscribe if this is something that interests you. And do feel free to leave a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if you're interested in seeing us perform any specific tests, or if there's any specific questions that you have in regards to the system or how it operates. And we'll see you next week.